So this is a Springer Spaniel. It's the third dog in a 4-dog portrait, and I thought it might be a useful video just to show you how I start off the initial layers when I'm drawing fur. And I know that spaniel ears are they can be quite challenging to do because of the different colours that are in there, the fluffiness, getting the curls right, that type of thing. So I'm actually talking live whilst I'm drawing rather than doing the voiceover later on, just so that I can explain to you in a little bit more detail how I use my pencils. So I am working on Clairefontaine Pastelmat, and it's the board and it's the dark grey, but I've actually used pan pastel in the background to create a mottled effect background. So around the edges where the pan pastel has kind of crept into the edges of the spaniel's ears, that does feel a little bit different to just drawing straight onto the pastel. So that's something to take into account. But actually, you get a softer feel straight away when you're doing sort of like little stray hairs, rather than the grainy look that you can sometimes get, or you get quite a bit when you're putting your first layers down on the pastel mat. So I'm using a Polychromos Ivory pencil. It's not particularly sharp because at the moment I'm just wanting to lay down a very light layer, and I'm using very soft pressure. So it's literally just touching the paper, and I'm just adding the first initial layer. The spaniel's ears are they're that lovely sort of gingery, orangey colour, but there's some lovely reds and browns in there as well. But the base colour I'm using is ivory. Just trying to get my picture right. So that's my first layer going down now. I am following the direction of the fur, and what I'll do is I'm going to put a first layer in on the ear, and then I'm going to put a first layer in on the ear, and then pick sort of smaller chunks of the ear to work on and work up. So what I tend to do is put the initial layer, this sort of white Pablo layer that you can sort of see around here. I put that in first just to give me an indication of where the fur's going, and then I start on with the main areas. So at the moment I am literally just putting very light layer in, and don't worry too much about the this is a warm grey that I've Polychromos that I've outlined the ears with. I just sketched it back in again with the pan pastel going over the outline. So I'm literally just going in very softly, using very soft pressure. I'm sort of using a bit of a sketchy stroke with the pencil, and I'm just sort of building in shapes really. I mean, this cream, it's going to be covered by the other colours, so it's you know, and the reason I'm going in really lightly is so that I can build the colours up later on. If I went in really hard, then I'm going to squash that lovely tooth that the pastel mat has, and then it's going to be trickier to get the more colours over the top. So I'm following the photograph that I've got pretty much, but honestly, you don't need to get every single hair and curl in exactly the same place. You know, unless you want to, of course, and that's entirely up to you. But as long as you get the semblance of the curls, obviously if a dog has got, you know, a crazy curly hair, and that's part of, you know, what they are, then it is important to get, you know, those certain characteristics in. But I'm following the photo pretty much, but I'm not getting really hung up with every single little curl, because it's just not, you don't need to do. Obviously the colour's important, so you know, what we've got here is, I've got a strand of hair on the reference photo where it goes from sort of like quite a dark brown through reds, through oranges to cream, you know, and that's really important to capture those colour changes, but in a really nice graduated way. And then we've got some quite dark shadows and everything in here as well, which I'm going to add in with probably Caput Mortem Violet, and also I'll use the dark indigo as well. So just by adding this very soft layer, you're starting to get a feel of the ear, and you're also starting to get a feel of the layers of hair. So you've got hair that's sort of sat back a little bit, and then this bit here is on top of, so it's further forwards, you know, so, and that's really important to try and get that right as well, and then you get the 3D look. So, and you can see as well that I'm not covering the entire ear with this cream. I find with drawing hair, it's easier for me to draw a layer that has gaps in it, because those then can be filled with different colours, and that's when you start to get the lovely variety of colour that you know, that is in fur. So instead of putting like a solid layer of cream on here and building it up from there, I tend to do it in this sort of quite sketchy feel to begin with. It works, the sketchy feel works on these initial layers with the Pastelmat because of the amount of layers that you can put in later on. And you'll also see that the pencil going down is really quite grainy. That's nothing to worry about. That is what you're going to get in the initial layers with such light pressure. And you know, that's going to be evened out and smoothed out as you add the layers later on. So okay, so I'm now going to move on to using, I'm going to use my Caput Mortem Violet here. It's Polychromos again, it's not particularly sharp. And I'm just going to plot in some of the shadow areas in here. So there's a big shadow down here, and again I'm using very light pressure. You can see how I'm holding my pencil. I'm holding it down. I mean, it's a shorter pencil, but I'm holding it down the length of the pencil rather than up like this, where I can get really detailed work. So I'm using it on the side, so I'm getting even pressure, but it's very light. And I'm looking at the shapes of the shadows, and I'm just very carefully plotting those in. Again, you know, it doesn't matter if you put marks in that you feel aren't right. You know, so if you put a mark and you think, oh god, you know, I've put that in the wrong place, it's fine. You can either lift it out with a putty eraser. I don't tend to use the Scotch Magic Tape on the darker paper, but that's just my preference. You could do that, or you can just leave it and go over the top of it with your next layer. And that's what is so fantastic about the Pastelmat. It's so forgiving that, you know, I tend to not, obviously I go wrong all the time, but I tend to not go wrong, because I can just layer over the top of it. So if something's put in and you think, oh gosh, that's in the wrong place, just layer over the top of it, and it adds an extra dimension really. So we've got another quite big shadow in here. Now these are soft, sketchy, light pressured areas of pencil that I'm adding in here. I'm not adding in any really dark areas, because the hair in a dog's ear It's not, there are no harsh lines. So what I'm not looking for is a base colour and then a stripy ear, you know, where all of the colours come in. I'm looking for everything to be beautifully blended together so it looks like hair, and it looks like the lovely soft silky hair on a spaniel's ear, which is why I'm using, or why I choose to use this really light pressure. So this area here isn't specifically a shadow, but there's a dark clump of hair. So I'm just kind of plotting that in. There's a big shadow here. There's also, when we come later on, when we've got a few more layers in, because of the properties of the pastel mat, you can work light over dark. So this big shadow here, this will end up being really quite dark, so there'll be some dark blues in there and probably a bit of black, but there also are a few stray hairs that are going over the top. Well, I can put those in later, so I don't need to worry about leaving spaces for them, or, you know, blocking them out or anything like that. I can put those in later. And there's a few strands of white hair that are in here as well, which again I'm going to put in later. There's a very dark shadow that comes down here, but again I don't want to go in really dark right from the start, because I want to make sure that I can blend this out, because there's a big shine here on the dog's cheek. So, and there's a big dark shadowy bit here. Any snoring sounds you can hear, it's not me falling asleep, it's actually my dogs. They're exhausted after their morning walk and they're both fast asleep, but they do make some snoring noises. Oh, I don't know whether you could hear that, but I think that was just him demonstrating that he was here and he was snoring. So some more shadowy areas here. And it's just building up. It's almost like sculpting. It's just building up these colours. And always, so my head is going from side to side. I've got my iPad just here to the right of me, and my eyes are just moving from my my drawing back to my reference photo, back to my drawing, so that I am getting all of these shadows basically in the right place. I'm not measuring and making sure that everything is exact, as I'd said before, but I'm making sure that these big shadows, and plotting these big shadows first are going to give you some landmarks almost for when you start to put in all of the other different colours. So there's a big shadow here, again very light, but you can start to see how this is beginning to build up now. Some big shadows in here. The other thing that I find really useful when I'm drawing fur, and I think this is because I'm quite a feely person, when I talk about stuff, it's how I feel. This feels like this feels like that. When I'm drawing, if I'm drawing different types of fur, I always visualize what that fur feels like. So if I was touching that fur, so if I was stroking this dog's head and touching her ear, what would that fur feel like? And I try and almost emulate that feeling down my pencil, so I know that these ears are silky, they're smooth, they're very soft fur, and I'm trying to emulate that. As I use my pencil, I'm using very sort of soft silky movements to try and represent that fur in the best way, really. If I was drawing sort of a coarser fur, so something like a wiry dog, or a cob type horse or something like that, the fur for a wiry dog, I'd probably have slightly more pressure, but I've maybe used sort of like circular movements to kind of create that wiry coloured hair, or I might do much sort of smaller pencil movements, and especially with cobs tend to have coarser fur, so sort of much coarser, shorter strokes, just to kind of, so you get the feel of the fur down the pencil, if you like. That might sound a bit weird, but it works for me. So I'm just adding in, again, I'm just using this Caput Mortuum Violet. It's like a dark, dusky sort of reddy violet colour. Really, really good for brown animals, and also for adding under blacks in shadows. You know, when you've got sort of warmer tones, it's a really good pencil to have in your kit. Again, still, I mean, my pressure hasn't changed particularly. I'm still following exactly the lie of the fur, which is incredibly important to get the realistic look of fur. And then, so when I'm coming into this area here, there are some darker areas, because obviously it's in shadow. It's where the ear kind of lifts off and goes back in here. So I am just increasing the pressure of my pencil slightly. I'm going to put some orangey colours in here as well, but I'm just increasing it slightly in here, just so that I get a semblance of the form of the dog's head. So this is obviously a very dark shadow in here, but there's some sort of like lighter hairs that are falling over it. But if I can just increase my pressure slightly, not but you know, just a little bit more, and add maybe a sort of like a few more pencil strokes than I would here, then I'm starting to get this ear is starting to, you know, it's starting to come to life now. I can see this bit here is in the foreground, this bit here is lovely, soft and wispy, and these bits here is sort of like in the background, but there's some shine and everything on them. So I'm really starting to get the feel of the curls that are coming in here. I can start to darken up these areas a little bit, and you know, all I've used are two pencils, the Polychromos Ivory and the Polychromos Caput Mortuum Violet, just the two pencils in this area at the moment, and it's looking okay. It's looking okay. Okay, so I'm now going to start to use my terracotta, Polychromos terracotta. Again, it's not sharp, which at the moment I'm not fussed about having sharp pencils at the minute, because I'm literally just laying sort of washes of colour down. I'm not going to use huge pressure, especially in this area here, because this is really soft, wispy fur, and there's going to be some stray hairs as well that move out over the top of the outline. So I'm just, even though you probably can't see them on the video, I know that they're there, and I'll come back and kind of strengthen them slightly. But I'm just going to, and then I'm going to come back again with the ivory and lighten bits of this up. So for me, the layering process is about adding colours, taking colours away, adding more colours, and taking more colours away. You know, you use light over dark, dark over light, and that's how you build the lovely shine that comes through an animal's fur, because obviously there aren't blocks of the same colour all the way through. It's just not how hair works. And what you can now start to see is that the little gaps that I've left when I put that initial cream layer down, the little gaps that I've left, this terracotta is going over the cream, and it's also filling in the gaps, so you're getting almost like a two-tone effect just in one layer, which again really helps with the look and feel of this fur. And then I can go over the top of the Caput Mortuum Violet as well. I don't need to worry, because if I'd gone in here with black, and then put my orange over the top of it, I would then start to get a green, because the black is cold. It's a blue based pencil, so obviously orange over blue, and you're going to get the greeny colours, which is why I've gone for the Caput Mortuum. We can add black a little bit later on. That's that's absolutely fine, and that's a given because these are really dark areas. But that's just something to just think about, when you're mixing your colours. So what I don't tend to do with my animal fur is have a look at the ear and go, right, that's this colour, right, that's that colour. There's nothing wrong with that, and there are some fantastic apps. I was looking at one yesterday, and it tells you exactly which colours to choose. You'll put your colour picker on the image where you want to choose what colour you're going to use, and it'll tell you exactly which pencil you're going to use. And I think you can even choose which brand of pencils you're using, which is amazing. And I think for beginners that's incredible. It really, really is useful. And what you'll find is that the more you draw, the more different colours you draw, the more your eye will start to almost train itself, and you'll start to see colours, and you'll start to understand which colours work best. And everybody has their favourite colours. Everyone has a different combination of colours that they use, and you will start to really understand which colours work for you. So I tend to use a lot of bright colours, a lot of the oranges, a lot of pinks, a lot of the dark blues, and I prefer to use dark blues and reds to create browns rather than using the browns in the pencil ranges. I do use the Polychromos walnut brown, because that's a really good solid brown, and it's good over the top of things like reds and blues, just to sort of like knock back any tones that are a little bit strong. So here I'm just adding in these mid-tone areas of the ear. So you can see it's not about going in and creating detail straight away. And if you want to go in and create detail straight away, and it works for you, fantastic. These techniques that I'm kind of sharing with you now, they're not the be all and end all. They're not the only techniques that you can use. They're just ones that I have I've either picked up and then tweaked and sort of made them my own, or they're ones that I've kind of experimented with. I've looked at something and I've gone, oh, I really want to get this effect. How do I do it? What do I do? How do I use my pencils? And with my animal fur, I want it to look like animal fur, and I want it to look as real as possible, and like you could almost touch it. And that's what I've been sort of experimenting with and using my pencils, and that's kind of how I work. But these techniques aren't unique to me, so I'm only kind of sharing what other artists have shared before, so I don't think any technique now is or anything that we do is unique, really. I think it's all been done before, but we all have our own little spin on things, and our own different way of doing things, which is it's a good thing. So these mid-tones here going in, I'm going to pick up my Indian red in a second and add those in. And actually I said that I was going to do a couple of layers and then just concentrate on one area. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to get these mid-tones in all over the ear, so we've got it all nicely blocked in, and then we can start to work on different areas and start to build in a little bit more detail. But even now you can see the softness of the ear coming through. There are no harsh lines. Everything's starting to blend nicely together. I've actually got this I need to be careful about this area here because the hair is actually coming down at a slightly different angle. So again, that's something to be really careful of. Don't just get woo-doo-doo-doo-doo and get carried away and la la la, and then all of a sudden go, oh, right, okay, that's all in the wrong direction. And that's really easy to do. It's really easy to get carried away with like the eyes and stuff, and you know, and have loads of fun drawing the eyes and then go, oh no, it's the wrong size, you know, because once you put loads of detail in and you've started to add a little bit more heavier pressure, you know, it can be quite difficult to change. I was doing a portrait a few months ago, and it was from a really quite a poor, actually I'm being kind there, it was a terrible reference, so I drew this eye, and the client was happy with it, blah 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 blah. I got to the end and she was like, oh, the eye, I'm not quite sure about the eye, and I was like, oh god. So I ended up putting let me see if I can find it. I ended up covering the entire area with the brush and pencil, coloured pencil touch-up texture, something that I've tried to use for white whiskers, and I haven't had much success, and everything goes a bit lumpy, but I think that's me and not the product. But anyway, I had to change the eye. I'd put loads of detail and everything in, so I couldn't just go in and change it. So I did use this, and I painted it over the top. It just comes with like a little brush applicator. And I painted it over the eye, and actually I was able to edit the eye. I mean, it wasn't brilliant, and it wasn't like I'd drawn it fresh on the paper, but it was a real help. So something like that to have in your kit as an emergency is a really good idea. But it's just something to think about, you know, especially eyes, noses. Just make sure you've got them measured properly, and they're working properly. You know, I mean, sometimes if you're not careful, you know, your eyes can be looking in the wrong directions, or one looking in one direction, the other one not quite. So it's you know, it is important, you know, to get those right. So back to this ear, and just blocking in these mid-tone areas. There's quite a bit of shine on these ears as well, but I will add that shine later on, and as I've done with my other spaniel's ear, I don't know whether you can see, there's a bit of an ear there. You can see how, actually that's really good, actually you can see how these initial layers are really light, and then we have, you know, the richness here of the ear that I finished, and you can see some of these little stray hairs and everything that you can put in over the top. So that's, and this is where I think people start to get really frustrated around this area, because you're putting it down and you're thinking, oh my god, you know, I need it to look rich, I need it to look lovely and colourful and everything. These first initial layers, they're so light, they're not going to look, you know, they're not going to look rich, vibrant colours, they're just not. But the more you layer up, the more they are going to, you know, the depth that you can get using this paper is incredible. You know, it really is. You're building up all of these beautiful colours, one over the top of the other, and you can see the colours coming through. You know, you're not obliterating the colours, you can see them coming through. So this area here I need to be a little bit more careful about, because there's actually some hair overlapping, so like quite a big shadowy area that I haven't put in. I might just put that in actually. So we've got this big shadow coming down here, and then we've got another one coming here. So I'll just get this in now, and then when I start to put my Indian red in, then it's gonna, but again, you know, it doesn't matter if you get these in slightly the wrong place, because you're looking for the semblance of that lovely curly spaniel ear. You know, luckily this one's not crazy curly. The crazy curly ones are very interesting to draw. So, and because I'm using all warm colours here, you know, we're not getting you know, we're not getting some weird old hues going on when I'm adding these colours in. Okay, so back to these areas, and again I've got some these have got some lovely light ends to them, and then this hair here is going in the different direction. So just again, you know, you can see the pressure I'm using is very light, sketchy. The ends of these hair, the ears here are sort of, you know, they're not. It's not a blunt cut, and then the hairs on this one are clearly going round. So you've got ends of hair here, and then these ones are going round. So that's something that we need to make sure that we show when we're drawing it. Okay, and then just add in a little bit more in here. So these are quite pale, these, and you can see the terracotta over the ivory. You know, it just gives a little bit of a paler hue, which is nice. And then the terracotta over the Caput Mortuum violet, you know, you get a stronger orange. So you're, in effect, so I've used 3 different colours on this. I've used ivory, I've used Caput Mortuum violet, and I've used the terracotta. But you've actually starting to get a whole semblance of different colours in here just from using those 3 pencils. Right, okay. So I'm now going to go in with Indian red. Again, I'm going to take this. I'm terrible for not taking off the barcodes on my pencils. So this is the Indian red. This is a fantastic colour for drawing fur, especially gingery fur, bay fur, that type of stuff. So it's red, obviously, but it's a proper browny red. And it's really rich and vibrant as well, and works incredibly well with the Caput Mortuum violet, and the terracotta and everything as well. So I'm just going to add in some bits here, and this is where we start to, so this over the top of the terracotta as well gives a really fabulous dark orangey colour. And again, you can see how lightly I am adding this over the top on this layer. I mean, it's super light. You know, the paper just, it's almost like a magnet. The paper just attracts the pigment off the end of the pencil almost. So I'm just going to richen up some of these shadow areas as well. Okay, and some of these midtones. And actually in this area here, I'm going to add some dark blue in there. I'm just trying to think, did I do it on this one? This particular area? Yeah, in here. So there's some quite sort of, it's almost like a maroony type colour. So I'm going to add some dark blue around this area here as well. But I'm going to add the red over the top first. So this Indian red over the top of the terracotta, because I don't want the green hue coming through. So if I add this red over the top and then I add the blue, it's going to go more sort of burgundy maroony colour. You know, that lovely sort of light sort of well, I want to say purple, but it isn't really purple. But I'm covering those terracotta-y areas so that I don't get the green coming through. And then we've got some quite light area here, so I'm just going to leave that. Okay, so I'm going to put some blue in just so that you can see what it's going to look like. Blue. Okay, so this one's actually quite sharp, not intentionally. It's just because I was using it for the eyes last night. But that's fine. Again, I'm going to use it very, very lightly. I'm going to start to deepen the shadows in this area here. And so now what's happening is I can start to incorporate some of those smaller details. So I've got some smaller shadowy bits here that are showing clumps of hair going over the top of each other. So now that I've got a few layers down, I can actually start to incorporate a few of those details. We've still got a long way to go with the layering of the ear. But I think once you start to see it working, and once you start to see the ear, coming to life really, I think it starts to get, you just want to crack on and work on it. There are some stray hairs coming over here as well, which I'm going to add in later on. The more layers I add, if you're familiar with pastel mat, you'll know that the more light layers you add, the smoother the paper becomes. And sometimes I sit and I think, oh my goodness, I'm adding all of these layers. Why don't I just use a blooming smooth paper? Why don't I just, and I had this argument with myself last night, and I was like, this is taking me forever. Why don't I just use a smooth paper? And actually I think I am going to have a bit of a play with some of the smoother papers, the Fabriano Artistico, the hot press papers. I have used them in the past, and I have used them quite successfully. But I think my style is around layering. I like to get all of these layers in and build all of that colour. That's not to say that you can't build colour, and depth and everything when you're using the smoother papers. But for me, maybe it's because I make so many mistakes. maybe it's because I go wrong so much, and you can't, the pastel mat is much more forgiving. Maybe that's what it is. I don't know. But I am going to have a go because, but then you hear other people, you hear how long it takes other people when they're working on the smoother papers, and it doesn't take them, any or much shorter than what I do with mine. And I suppose because I go into so much detail with mine as well, that's what's that's what's taking the time up. But who knows? So you can see now you're starting to get this nice sort of burgundy, sort of almost like a plummy colour, with the blue over the top of the reds and the terracottas. And I need to build some highlights into this, which I will do at some point. But you're really starting to get the feel now of how this ear is coming together. So I'm gonna just deepen that. Again, it can look really quite grainy. And that's something I think that does frustrate people quite a bit, because in these early stages, it can get really grainy. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to use probably, this is the cinnamon, again a really good pencil to have in your kit, and again it's Polychromos, but I'm going to add this just because I've got some highlights and everything going on in here anyway. But this is a really great pencil for smoothing. And I've chosen the pink just because it's going to really complement the colour, the reds and the blues that I've already put down. So just a light layer over the top of, and just, you can see how I'm kind of on the colour and then I'm dragging the colour out, because you're using such a light pressure on your pencils. The pigment just sort of like sits on top of the paper, so it's almost like you can move it around. I'm not a very technical person, and I don't know whether I don't know, but that's kind of how I see it. You use such light pressure that you can push the pigment around, and you can push all of those different colours together. So you can see that's looking a lot smoother now. And this is when I say work light over dark. This is kind of the what you do, and then you can go back over again with your dark, and build up those sort of deeper areas. Okay. I'm just adding some of this dark indigo into this shadow here. Okay, so now I'm going to pick up, so again, Polychromos, burnt sienna. This is this is I think the second brown that I actually use on animal fur. This one and the walnut brown. There are some proper burnt sienna-y type colours around here, coming down here, and then into this bit here, and then round this bit here, and in here. So I'm going to add some of these very lightly again into these mid-tone areas. So it's another layer, and I'm just going to add this again in the direction of the fur. I don't want to go in too heavy with this because it can be quite a strong colour, and I just have to be careful when I'm again going over sort of like any blues or blacks or anything, because it can just creep to being a little bit greeny just because of the hues. Obviously this is quite a warm brown, you know, so sort of yellowy based, so you do just have to be a little bit careful. Okay, so just and I've got under here, I've got some shadowy bits which I can start to build in a little bit more. And here I've got some real highlights coming down here, so I'll put them in, and there's quite a rich area down here. And you can see it's just, you know, I'm still just touching the paper. There's still areas of paper actually where there aren't any colours yet, and they will end up being you know, filled, but I think that's kind of where you you know, you start to get the depth again. So there's a big shadow down here which I need to start blocking in again with the darker red. And I think I'll put this in, and then I think I'll put some highlights in, just so that we know where those are going to sit. So taking, you know, real care as to the direction of the fur. Okay, so that's like a sweepy bit of fur down there, and then that's a, and then obviously we can build in the shadows and everything. There's a shadow cast here by this clump of hair, so we can build that in as we're building the some of the darker colours in. Just plotting those in here. Again, we're still quite sketchy at this point. You know, there's no precise pencil work here. There's no tiny detail or anything like that. We are still just plotting in those colours and starting to build up the tones, because actually the details come with the tonal values.